very, very excited about the direction that the Panthers are going in right now. When last we spoke, Andy Dalton had become a quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, and I think that's a great move. All right? I do. And I know a lot of you guys are going, wait a minute, Rob, you're a Saints fan. You literally watch Andy Dalton more than anybody in the upstate. How can you think this is a great move? And it's very, very simple why I think it's a great move. Andy Dalton is the right fit here. And he's the right fit here for one reason. He's the perfect bridge quarterback, right? You're getting him on a good deal, a 2-year deal. You're paying him just north of $10 million for 2 years. It's not breaking the bank. He knows at this point, I think, what his role is in the NFL. Andy Dalton is a dude who is a suitable starter when called upon, but a guy that is more of a placeholder until you find the dude. Andy Dalton knew, even when starting last year in New Orleans, I think, that his time was limited. New Orleans was a stage for Andy Dalton to put in some efforts to try to get a contract like this one, a good financial deal for a couple of years to build up the bank account. He was looking for a team where he'd get a crack at being the starter one more time. Hell, maybe a good enough starter to push off the incumbent, the next guy, for a little while, right? To kind of push him back down the line a little bit and give them some time to learn. Carolina was just that. A guy that was going to get an opportunity with a decent wide receiver cast. We now know that that is the case. We now know that he is going to be without DJ Moore, obviously, who is now a Chicago Bear. But we also know that he is going to have with him Adam Thielen. Thielen, of course, is a big-time wide receiver, one of the most frustrating wide receivers in the game. If you spend any time watching Minnesota ball the last couple of years, you know that Adam Thielen is not a dude who's going to hit the 9 route, streaking directly to the end zone and just outrunning guys. He is a dude that as soon as the ball is snapped, recognizes where there's going to be a hole in the defense, breaks down in that spot, and takes a snap. That's a massive pickup, right? That's a massive pickup. You've also got, alongside Adam Thielen, you've got Shai, another guy, excellent possession receiver. You've got TMJ, Terrence Marshall Jr. That is a dude who can get up and make some stuff happen for you. Now you've also added Philadelphia Eagles running back Miles Sanders. How important was Miles Sanders to the Eagles this year? Over 1,200 and a half yards rushing, 11 touchdowns, 20 receptions through the air over the course of the season as well. You put Miles in front of Raheem Blackshear and Chuba Hubbard. Like, I love the pickup of Miles Sanders. That's a big one. I love the pickup of Adam Thielen. That's a big one. The offensive line, as mentioned, has already been built. It improved dramatically from the first 5 weeks of the season to the last 10. Kind of fell apart in a couple of games late, but a lot of frustration going on at that point too. So you've got an offensive line. You've got a running back now in Miles Sanders. You've got a running back by committee, as Raheem Blackshear and Chuba Hubbard both stepped up their game. Adam Thielen is now your number one, alongside a couple of very serviceable backup guys. Adam Thielen, TMJ, Shai Smith. You've got Laviska Shenault backing them up as your fourth wide receiver. You bring in Hayden Hurst at tight end. Look, I like Ian Thomas. Ian Thomas is a dude, but he's not a remarkable pass catching tight end. All right, he's just not. Hayden Hurst, about as top flight as you are going to get out of this free agent class. I love that Carolina addressed some needs. They also did it on the defensive line, bringing in Shai Tuttle from New Orleans as well. So now, what's going to be very interesting is to see what the front 3/maybe 4 looks like for this Panther defense. I've mentioned a couple of times that while Ejiro Evero is a 3-4 guy, he's a very hybrid 3-4 guy. He's a guy that understands the value of being able to rotate back and forth from 3-4 to 4-3 and back. Now you've got both Derek Brown and Shy Tuttle at defensive tackle, which means you can plug in a 4-3 on obvious rundowns, right? You give a little help to Shaq. You give a little help to Frankie Louvu stepping up and basically filling in gaps based on blocking schemes. It also allows you to run a lot of that 3-4. It allows you to put Burns on one side, Gross-Matos on the other, and then rotate Brown and Tuttle so both of those guys stay fresher longer, meaning you can save some of the stamina bar of your defensive tackles as you get deeper into games and the run game becomes more valuable. So does the run defense. And I'm saying this not as a Panthers fan. I'm saying this as a Saints fan, right? As a divisional rival. I've said a bunch of times I have adopted since I moved here the Ric Flair mentality. The only thing that's good for me is that which gets me paid. Whoa! I need the Panthers to do well. If the Panthers make a playoff run, guess who gets called to go pop off at remotes at bars and get money? Me. Whoa! As a Saints fan, I hate what the Panthers are doing. I hate what they're doing. Because while, as of right now, they still have not solved the biggest problem they need to solve, that is the quarterback position. What I can say is you've got a dude who is serviceable in Andy Dalton. Serviceable, not great, not excellent, but serviceable in Andy Dalton. You've got the first overall pick, meaning that you get your pick from the cream of the crop year between Stroud, Young, Richardson, or Levis. You've got some weight if you decide to trade back because you believe Richardson or Levis is that dude. If you want to make the move, you've got some weight to that, right? So there's a lot of teams that still need to solve the quarterback conundrum, but there's only one of them that has the first overall pick in the draft to do it. That's Carolina. You have solved the tight end problem with Hayden Hurst. I'm not going to say that Adam Thielen has the possibility or the potential to do DJ Moore numbers, but what he is a very good wide receiver one, backed up by, I think, a solid set of WR2, 3, and 4 in Marshall Smith and Chenault, right? I think you've got an outstanding offensive line. This team is being put together and put together very well. You got Bradley Bozeman back. That is invaluable experience at the center position. That's big time. Between Icky, Brady, Corbett, and Moton across the other spots in the front four, you've got as solid and youthful of an offensive line as you could ask for. Defensively, the Panthers were already good, but now you've added a very good defensive tackle in Shy Tuttle next to Derek Brown. You've got one of the best 3 defensive end tandems in football. If you can get Shaq Thompson signed to a contract extension, you're in a great spot. And he has already said publicly multiple times that he wants to get that done. He wants to be there. And I think that's all but proven. And now in the backfield, by adding Von Bell, an outstanding starting strong safety, which allows Jeremy Chin to go back to being that classic free safety that he is suited for, maybe better than anybody else. Oh, and by the way, Dante Jackson and J.C. Horn locking down your cornerback spots. This team is excellent, okay? This team, talent-wise, on paper, is excellent. Now we just got to see if Frank Wright can do 2 things. Number 1, Can Frank Reich get the right quarterback out of this draft? A. And B, can he coach them all up? If the answer is yes, this team's got fire across the depth chart. So it comes down to quarterback. It comes down to coaching. But the offseason for the Carolina Panthers has been honestly better than I thought it would be, and I thought it would be pretty good. I have had a lot of criticisms of David Tepper, and I think fair and justified were most of them. But he and Scott Fitterer, I think, have had the best offseason in the National Football League. I look at Dallas, a team that was close, right? A team with the highest of expectations going into the offseason. What do they end up with? They end up with Brandon Cooks as their biggest acquisition. That ain't it, dog. That ain't it. They get rid of Ezekiel Elliott, probably a year or two too late, but we'll see if he's able to have a resurgence somewhere else. Just top to bottom, I don't think there's a team that has had a better offseason than the Carolina Panthers. And looking up and down their depth chart today, I'm going to stand by that. Somebody texted a minute ago, 71307. Start your text with FAN, FAM. We'll read them on the air. Texter said Andy Dalton is a joke. Right. I'm not trying to sell you on Andy Dalton as your starting quarterback. I am trying to tell you that Andy Dalton, as a bridge quarterback to the quarterback of the future, whether it is Young or Stroud, Richardson or Levis, I am simply trying to tell you that Andy Dalton is about as good of a placeholder as you could ask for in this scenario. Andy Dalton gives you experience. Andy Dalton gives you knowledge. Andy Dalton gives you consistent, maybe not excellent, but consistent play at that position while you get QBF, the QB of the future, ready. Now, my pick is CJ Stroud. I've been waffling on that quite a bit. I've been bouncing quite back and forth on that quite a bit. I've been wondering about that quite a bit. CJ Stroud's the pick. There's too much risk trading back to Anthony Richardson. I am concerned about Anthony Richardson. I am concerned that Anthony Richardson is going to be a guy that when it comes down to it, there's just too much growth needed. He's got the highest ceiling in the draft. He might ultimately be the next coming of Lamar Jackson. But that's a big if. It's a big risk. CJ Stroud is the most ready today to take that spot, but even he, I think, will benefit from a couple of months of learning the speed of the NFL. Andy Dalton gives you a better playmaker than you could have asked for a bridge quarterback of not even a full season while you get CJ Stroud ready to roll in that position. This entire setup is as good as you could have asked for the Cats. I've had a lot of criticism of David Tepper. I've had some criticism of Scott Fitterer. But I am going to tell you now that both of these Cats deserve a round of applause for this Carolina Panther offseason. Y'all know I got exactly zero problem throwing fire at the Cats when they deserve it. They do not deserve it this offseason. This offseason is the best offseason of anybody in the National Football League, and I don't think it is particularly close. Let's make one thing abundantly clear, since we're talking Panthers for just a minute here. You have to get this quarterback pick correct. It is not an option at this point. You have to get it correct. If you don't get this right, then all of the very good work, let's be abundantly clear, like I said, I don't hand out A-pluses very often. But if you don't get this quarterback pick correct, all of the good work that you have put in this offseason, which, by the way, is a lot of it, could very well be for nothing. If you don't have a QB1 in the NFL, you're not going to get there, right? Think about the teams in the playoffs this year. Think about the teams that went to the playoffs last year. Think about the teams that made their way through the playoffs. The Chiefs with Mahomes, the Bills with Allen, the Bengals with Burrow, the Jags with Lawrence, the Chargers with Herbert, the Ravens with Lamar. The only team that I could circle and say they did not do it with a great quarterback is the Miami Dolphins. And even then, Tua Tagovailoa had a phenomenal start to the season before his multiple concussions. Then I look over in the NFC. Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. Jalen had a renaissance this year, right? Jalen went next level in the way that he played. The 49ers. Brock Purdy went from Mr. Irrelevant to a guy that is now making us question whether Trey Lance is the dude in San Francisco or if Brock Purdy should get another crack. The Vikings did it, but we knew the Vikings were inevitably going to have a playoff collapse, and they did. Why? Because they can't rely on primetime Kirk Cousins. Great quarterback for whatever reason when the light's not bright, but when the Vikings hit the precipice, he falls apart. Look at the teams that have been getting in. Look at the teams that have been making playoff runs. The Buccaneers did it without Tom Brady, with Tom Brady, but they stunk when Brady was having one of his worst years. The Cowboys got in as a wild card team. Dak's not an awful quarterback. The Giants did it with Danny Dimes, and Seattle did it with Geno Smith, who won Comeback Player of the Year award and deserved it, by the way. You cannot make it to the NFL playoffs, and you certainly cannot make it through the NFL playoffs without having a quarterback that is at least reliable. If Carolina botches this quarterback pick at number 1 overall, and they bring in a guy who just doesn't got it, then all of these additions aren't going to do you a heck of a lot of good, right? You will end up being the Minnesota Vikings, a team that talent-wise has everything in place, but a team that when it comes down to, because of the way the NFL is structured, needing a quarterback who can shine in the playoffs to get there, you collapse inevitably. You can't take that risk. You've got to get this right. You've got to get this right. The problem here is that of the top 2 guys, Stroud and Young, there's a lot of cons for both of them, right? With CJ Stroud, the question mark is how much of that was CJ Stroud being a next level college football quarterback? And how much of that was CJ Stroud being surrounded by top tier talent that other college quarterbacks wish that they had? With Bryce Young was not surrounded by as much talent at Alabama. That's why he also wasn't in the playoffs this year. So I got a little bit more trust that the things we saw Bryce Young doing were because Bryce Young can consistently do those things. The question mark that I have about Bryce Young is, can he take the Drew Brees route and despite being 5'9" and 3/4, still get it done at that level? I hope the answer is yes for Bryce Young's sake. But you're taking a gamble. You're taking a risk, regardless of which one of the two you decide to go with. That's not to say that they won't both pay off, but it's also not to say that that neither one of them will pay off. As I've mentioned a number of times, and will continue to, Anthony Richardson, I think, has the highest physical ceiling in the National Football League. Anthony Richardson, I think, could be the most talented of these position group players. I also know that he is the furthest from his ceiling, right? I don't know what CJ Stroud's ceiling is. Is it Russell Wilson? Is it Lamar Jackson? Is it somewhere in the middle? But I also don't know that CJ Stroud won't get to the next level, not have the separation of talent that he had at Ohio State University. A team that took your eventual national champion Georgia Bulldogs down to the very last play, right? Ended up in the worst missed field goal in the history of the college football playoffs. I don't know if he'll be able to do that when he doesn't have the separation of talent level that he did in Ohio. I don't know that Bryce Young, who did not have that separation of talent, but reached a very similar gap, very similar level of accomplishments. I don't know that Bryce Young is going to have a Bama quality OL out front of him that kind of negates him being an undersized quarterback. We've heard all about undersized quarterbacks. Kenny Pickett's tiny hands, Joe Burrow's tiny hands. And those guys done okay. Joey B specifically. So being undersized is not the end of the world. It is not the only thing that does or doesn't matter. But he also had a top-tier OL in front of him. As did Stetson Bennett, by the way. If you don't get this QB pick correct, it's probably going to be another year or two before you can make another move. Now, you sign him to a Trey Lance-esque contract. You've got a guy in Andy Dalton that can spend a year or two under center, earning you that extra time. That's all well and good. That's all fine. But if you don't get it right, it might be 3 years before you can get another one. Guess who's off contract in 3 years? Most of these studs, most of these playmakers. Now, you can get all, if not most of them back by making a deep playoff run over the next couple of years. But if you don't, and those guys decide to bail, what is right now, I think, the best offseason in the National Football League will have been for naught. And that would be wildly frustrating.